o'clock. You guys don't have to sit way in the back. You make me feel like now I need to scream and yell. Well, I am Lori with Behavior Education at Spirit Keeper Animal Sanctuary. I am a certified animal trainer and behaviorist. I got my degree in zookeeping about 7 or 8 years ago, and then subsequently got a bachelor's degree in animal health and behavior, and I'm working on my graduate degree right now in animal science and behavior to start a doctorate next year in applied behavior analysis or cognitive psychology. I haven't decided yet, but all of my work applies to animals, not people, so don't come and look me up after I get my doctorate and want help. You have to go to a therapist because I only am a therapist for animals. So I am local. We have an animal sanctuary just east of Colorado Springs, but my veterinarian for my snakes and any other reptiles, and actually all of our animals now except the horses, is Dr. Liza Pfaff in Centennial, Colorado. So I am up here a lot. I have some of my clients up here in the front row that are local and that came all the way from Iowa. Yay. So I'm happy to have you all here. So Nick said he wanted me to talk about enrichment for snake and other reptiles today, and that's pretty easy because I have a webinar that is open to the public. There is a small cost, but it's through the International Association of Applied Behavior Consultants, the IAABC, and you can go online and sign up for that webinar. It's pre-recorded. It's about 3 hours, I think. I think it's $25 or $35. So there's a webinar about this subject. And then I also wrote an article for the IAABC Journal about enrichment for snakes and other reptiles. So you can read that for free online. So if you're the type of person that wants to see stuff in a class format and you want to read an article, that's all out there for you. Today, I'm going to just talk to you about what enrichment is, demonstrate some different really easy items to get your hands on to enrich your snake or other reptile. So understand though that enrichment applies to all organisms. You can provide enrichment for your dogs, cats, horses, zoo animals are all provided with enrichment. All behavioral husbandry plans at zoos, if they're an accredited zoo, has to have a behavioral husbandry plan. It has to include enrichment. You can do enrichment for yourselves, for your kids, for your partners, right? You got some enrichment today, right? Your pen. So enrichment is when you add something above what is normally in your environment, okay? So enrichment is, if you have a reptile, how many of you have reptiles already? Raise your hand. Okay, how many of those reptiles are snakes? Raise your hand. Your hand should be up too, you live with her. Okay, so I'm imagining my snake's enclosure. Some of mine are pretty complex. I keep all of my snakes, and we have 146 at our animal sanctuary, 145 after hers goes home. And they're all in enriched habitats. So an enriched habitat means that it's environmentally complex. And it has all of the things that that animal would need to do in nature, ideally, as best as we can, under human care. So my semi-arboreal snakes, which are my favorite, Morelia bredli, Bredl's pythons, they have things to climb on. They have shelves, they have ledges, they have climbing items, and they have some fake and real plants. Some of them have substrate of different types, but they're not really a snake that spends a lot of time on the ground, so I don't really have to worry about that as much for them. Their natural habitat is very arid and dry. It's like a desert habitat. It looks like Garden of the Gods if you guys have ever been there. That's where Bredl's pythons are native to an environment like Garden of the Gods. So it's red, sandy soil that's hard, packed, it's cliffs, it's rocks. So they don't really care about the substrate because that's not what they use. Now, if you have a hognose snake, you have a king snake, you have any kind of snake that burrows under the ground, a fossorial snake, what's it going to care about? It's going to care that I put substrate in there. It's going to care that it has something to tunnel in and burrow under. I have sabu pythons. Have you guys heard of a sabu python? It's Liasis sabuensis. They're from a really tiny island off the coast of Indonesia in the Lesser Sunda Islands. It's only 40 square kilometers. So that's really small. Like, I think Denver's bigger than that. Okay, it's a super small island. These snakes are an endangered species, so they are listed by the IUCN as endangered. I have 5 of them at our facility, and you know what they do all day long? They burrow. I thought when I first got them that they had all escaped and gotten out, because they burrow so deep under the soil, they look like they're just gone. So it's really important to a snake like that that you have deep substrate. During the day, what do they do? At night, they wake up and they come out and they climb a lot. So I can see by observing that species under captive management, probably how they behave in the wild and why no one ever sees them. Because when they're out and active and climbing, it's nighttime. And during the day, when people are out and about on the island, they are buried deep under the soil. So knowing that about their natural history is important for habitat setup. So their habitat is set up to accommodate climbing at night and burrowing during the day. That's an enriched habitat. That's providing normal environmental complexity. That is not enrichment. Enrichment is when I add something to that habitat that's novel, that's new, that they don't experience or see every day. So they're used to their regular habitat. You know, you're used to the things you do in life every single day, but one day you decide, I'm going to go to a reptile expo. I'm going to go to an amusement park. Hey, let's go swimming today. Let's go horseback riding today. That's maybe something you never do, so that's an enrichment experience. It's something you do above and beyond what is normal, and that's what enrichment is. Or you might add something to your environment as enrichment that's a temporary addition. So what would be something that maybe you would add to your house that's a temporary addition that you get and then it goes away after a time?
Christmas tree.
A Christmas tree. We just did this for my mom. We got her flowers. We got her a big bouquet of flowers. Those are gonna die after like, what, a week or 2? So that's enrichment. She's like, oh, I love flowers. I have these flowers in my house, but they're gonna go away. Now, if I sent her flowers every single day, and they were the same flowers every single day, now that's not enrichment anymore because now it's just a normal thing. So enrichment is above and beyond what you would normally do for your snake or other reptile. It doesn't have to be difficult. Just understand the difference between an enriched habitat and an enrichment experience or an enrichment item. All right. So how many of you think that you have provided enrichment for your snakes before or your reptile before? What's an example of something you've done to provide enrichment?
We have a playpen.
Okay.
So it's round. But
right.
Yeah.
So I brought some small examples here of really inexpensive playpens or exercise spaces that you can set up for your snake or other reptile. And these are small ones. This is actually meant to go over plants outside to keep insects off of them, or people raise butterflies in them. But you can stand this up tall and put climbing things in it, or you can lay it on its side and put stuff in here for your reptiles. Close them up, they get fresh air, they get to experience a different location, and guess what? These come, I have a huge one of these that's 6 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. It pops open like this. They come in all different sizes, and these are pretty inexpensive. Like, literally that huge one I have was $65, so this one was like $29. Yeah, really inexpensive. You could also use giant tubs for an exercise space, or pop-up round dog exercise tents. Some of those have holes in them, and I have a video about this on my channel that you can see, to put a water bottle through for a dog or a rabbit or another animal. Make sure your snake can't crawl out through that water hole. Those are great if you have a snake that can't just free roam in your room. If your room is not snake proof where you can let it out for exercise to free roam, then you need to have it contained in something. But you don't just put it in this space and there you go, you've got this space, right? Because some snakes are super uncomfortable with a lot of space, so you got to fill it up with stuff. Some snakes like the space to move around. My Bredl's pythons really like just space to move around. They like to just be out in the open. But my royal pythons, my Sabu pythons, they would be very uncomfortable just out in an open space. So you've got to fill your exercise space up with enrichment items. Or if your snake's not confident enough to come out of the enclosure, you might put some of the enrichment items in the enclosure. Okay? So who else is providing enrichment for their reptile? And what is an example of one thing you've done?
So we got like one of those little tree ball, like 2 balls things, and we put little like super worms in there for our bearded dragon.
Oh, perfect.
That's a great idea.
All right.
Oh.
Excellent. So that's an example of dietary or food enrichment, which brings me to the different enrichment categories. So the AZA, that's the American Zoo and Aquarium Association here in the United States, but also there are these same associations in Europe. They define enrichment by breaking it down into 5 categories. Cognitive. So cognitive is how is that reptile or that animal working its brain? What kind of puzzles are you giving it? How is it problem solving? How is it having to think? That's cognitive enrichment. I do a lot of that through training, target training and station training with snakes. I actually train them to do specific behaviors where they have to think about it. Oh, what do I have to do in order to get my reinforcement, which is usually a food reward or something else they like. Okay? So that's cognitive enrichment, and that's what you've kind of done there. Is you said it's for a bearded dragon. It has to figure out, how do I get the super worms out of this ball? How can I get to it? How can I get it out of the ball? So it is mimicking hunting behavior, right? Animals in the wild have to hunt. They don't just, the food just doesn't come to them in their burrow or their den or their tree or their rock ledge or their cave. They have to get up and wake up and leave hiding, and they have to go look for their food. And they have to figure out how to get it and how to manage it and get a hold of it and eat it and how to safely get back home. That's a lot of problem solving and a lot of thinking. And the more that we can mimic that under captive management, the more natural of a cognitive environment we're trying to provide for our reptiles. That is also an example of food or dietary enrichment, which is the second category. So we've got cognitive enrichment and dietary or food enrichment. That's where instead of just giving the animal a meal on a plate, here you go, eat, okay, I ate, 20 seconds, I'm done, now what? You present the food in a manner that mimics their natural eating behavior or natural hunting behavior, or gives them some problem to solve to get to the food. It could be a puzzle feeder, it could be a holy roller ball, it could be some other kind of treat dispensing ball, it could be having to do some training behaviors first to earn their food. You can hide food in their enclosure. There's all sorts of different things you can do with food for dietary enrichment. So we've got cognitive and dietary enrichment. The third one is physical enrichment. That is physical exercise. What would your snake be doing in the wild if it lived in all of nature in its natural habitat? My Bruttles pythons would be climbing and hanging down off rock ledges and out of rock crevices and out of trees, and they would be moving across large expanses of empty ground to get to the next clump of bushes or trees or ledges. What would your bearded dragon be doing? I know you have them too in the wild. Basking on a rock. Okay. What else do? They don't move around? How do they
be hunting, they'd be running around.
Climb trees.
Climbing trees, hunting, running around?
Yeah,
Moving.
Moving, yeah.
Okay. So you need to look at what reptile you have, and you need to know, well, what's its natural history and biology? If it was in its wild habitat, what the heck would it be doing right now? And maybe during the day it would be sleeping. Maybe at night it would be like super active, or the opposite, depending on your reptile. But physical enrichment, what can you do in your house, in our zoos, in a lab, in an educational, in a school, to promote exercise, to get our reptiles to move? Well, that's where a lot of this stuff comes in handy, where you can give them items to investigate that they're going to be curious about, to climb on, okay? And it doesn't have to be anything major. This is a parrot perch, a bird perch that I got off Amazon and put together that's for birds, but my semi-arboreal snakes love to climb on this, and they'll coil around it and rest on it. This is just a stool that I turned upside down that they like to climb on, okay? These things are sold by a company called the Reptile Perch, and they're actually meant to put in tubs like this. I don't know why you would keep a snake in a tub permanently. I use these for transport to the vet or for emergency evacuations. My snakes do not live in them. It's just the craziest thing I've ever heard of. When I started to work with reptiles about 7 or 8 years ago, I just can't even conceive of why anyone would keep snakes in a drawer or a tub, because they live in the world, they live in nature. So these were made to put in these tubs to give them something to climb on, and some of them have water, you know, a hole for your water dish. Well, I use these for transport. If I'm taking my snake to the vet, the last one I took in here was named Gunji. Does anybody know where that name came from? I'm a huge science fiction nerd, and Gunji is a Jedi from Star Wars, but like a lesser known one that unless you watched a certain show, you wouldn't know. So my snake Gunji went to the vet, and I put some paper towels in here and this climbing thing, and this is what I transported him in. But you can use these things for non-transport to put in enclosures, because it's still a really cool thing for your snake to climb on or rest on. And I oftentimes will lean them up against the wall like this, and it's a little ladder for them. And they make these in different sizes. So this is really cool, but you don't have to purchase something specifically for a snake. There's a lot of enrichment stuff for like small mammals, birds, ferrets. I use a lot of that stuff for my snakes because they actually make ladders, you know, for birds, and I can set those up in there. All right, so I'm talking a lot about snakes that climb, but what about snakes that don't? What can you do for enrichment for them? So I can encourage my climbing snakes to climb and move by setting these things up, and it's attractive to them because these are things they seek in nature. So their seeking system kicks in, and they want to seek out, oh, I want to climb up that tree, I want to climb on that thing. It gets them to move, it gets them to climb. They're using their muscles. Whenever I take mine to the vet, my vet always says, your snakes are so fit and they're so strong. Like I can feel how strong they are with their muscles because they do so much climbing at your house. All right, what if I have a snake that doesn't climb? They like to dig, they like to burrow. What can you give them for cognitive enrichment? Well, how about different substrates? Okay. What I do for snakes that burrow or dig is I will put them in an exercise tent, and I will take these boxes and leave the lids off, and I get shallower ones, and I fill them up with different substrates. So I might have aspen in one, coconut chips in one, dirt in one, I might have moss in one, I might put sand in one, I might put whatever, just different substrates, and I set them in there, and the snake can now investigate the different substrates, figure out which ones they like to burrow in, and it's fun for them. It should be different substrate than what they normally have in their enclosure, because that's what makes it enriching. Now, if your snake's too shy to come out, and you put them in a tent and they're like, I'm terrified, I don't like this, you can put a substrate enrichment in their enclosure, different from the regular substrate they have. You can easily get something smaller and put substrate in and set it right in their enclosure with them, and you can take it out after a day or two and put a different kind of substrate in it. As long as it's safe for your snake, you can just, I've tried wacky stuff that's not even for animals that I know is safe and non-toxic just to see if they interact with it. You know, like a tub of marbles. Does my snake interact with that? Okay, it didn't use that, I'm going to take it out and try something else. Oh, it did interact with that. You know, my hognose snake really pushed through those glass marbles for a couple of days. That kept it occupied for 2 days. Now I take that out and it's done with it. Okay. What else can you do for burrowing or fossorial snakes? Now let's move away from cognitive, but what about dietary? That's where you can hide food for them. I also target train my fossorial snakes. So I usually start out with some vibration signal and then follow with food. So they know to come out, oh, I can earn reinforcement. Then when they stick their head out, or if I can see them in a hide, I'll shine a flashlight, and now the flashlight becomes the signal that we're going to do an activity. And then I target train them or do whatever I'm going to do to teach them the behavior. So we've got Dietary we talked about, cognitive we talked about, physical enrichment we talked about for fossorial and arboreal snakes. The other two enrichment categories are sensory and social. Sensory enrichment is what can they smell, see, feel, sense through all of the senses that the snake or the reptile has. What novel sensory experiences can they have? So some of these things we've already discussed can double in more than one enrichment category. So food enrichment can also double for sensory because they have to smell that food to find it, presumably. Okay. And then the substrate enrichment we talked about, or the climbing enrichment we talked about, if the climbing items are textured differently, if the substrates are different textures, that's also sensory enrichment. And sometimes I will just throw stuff down for them to interact with and climb on. That's random items that I'm not gonna throw this away, but random items I'm gonna throw away anyway. This had dog treats in it, so it smells different than anything that's gonna be in their enclosure, and the paper feels different. This had boxed water in it. It's definitely probably not gonna smell like anything, but it's got a different texture. And for some reason, snakes love empty cardboard stuff. Cardboard toilet tissue rolls, cardboard paper towel rolls, mailing tubes, empty cardboard boxes. I always give them to the snakes before I throw them out. They literally spend more time with those empty boxes than anything I buy for them. They're like cats in that respect, for sure. Paper bags. They seem to really like crinkling paper. And it gives me so much satisfaction to hear this, because I know my reptile is interacting with whatever I put in there. So I use paper bags because cool, they can go inside it too, and that's really cool for them. You can cut holes in it, and then they can crawl in it and out of it in different spots. You can do that with cardboard boxes too. I just take sometimes the butcher paper or paper that comes when stuff is shipped, crinkle it up and throw it in their enclosure or throw it in their exercise tent, and I love hearing them crawl around it. I love hearing the paper because I know they're using it. So they seem fascinated by simple things like that. What other things can you do for sensory enrichment? You can give them smells that they wouldn't normally interact with and see if it's aversive to them or they like it. You may not always know this. You need to make sure it's safe. Some essential oils are not safe for reptiles, some are. So you've got to make sure and check that out first. But I have literally put one drop of lavender on a cardboard and my snake interacted with it for over 30 minutes. Smelling like that one spot of lavender. Fruit, bananas, apples, other fruit, if you sit that in a basket where your snake can access it, they will, some of mine interact with the fruit and smell the fruit and crawl on the fruit. So you've got different textures and you've got different scents. Okay. You can give them different heat gradients or cool gradients, not force it. And I made something way different than what you would have in their normal enclosure. So like a bowl of ice cubes. Now you're not making them interact with it or sit in it, but if they're curious about that, it's there for them to interact with until the ice melts. They also sell some stuff, and I learned this from my vet, and she uses them at her practice when she knows a snake's coming in. It's a round circle thing you put in the microwave and it heats up. And then it has a fuzzy cover that goes over it, and it stays hot for several hours. Not too hot that it burns the animal, but it stays warm. So she always puts that on the exam table when I'm bringing a snake in case it wants to rest on that heat. So I use that for enrichment. I use those for, and I meant to bring one and I forgot to pack it with the other stuff. So I will set those in the enrichment tents, and that way if the snake wants different heat than they get, because I use overhead heat in their enclosures, but if they want to sit on something warm, they can sit on that. Could you plug in a heating pad? Yeah, but I would put it on the outside. I want to put a heating pad inside with them, just unless you're going to pile. You don't want them to overheat, but you want them to access that warmth if they're not used to it. If your reptile's used to like under tank heating, then put overhead heating in the enrichment space and see how they interact with that. So just a different heat source or something cold to see what happens. Do they interact with cold at all? Do they avoid it? It's just something different in their environment to make them think, to make them curious. And sometimes I don't know what they're going to interact with or not. I just try stuff and I see what they use, what they don't. So sensory enrichment can definitely be paired with these other things we've talked about, but it can also just be its own thing. Okay. Water. My Superdorf retic, he likes the water, so he'll swim in the bathtub, and I'll fill it and let him choose to do that or not. I don't put him in the bathtub. He comes out on his own. His name's TC. I have tons of videos about him. He comes out on his own, and I'll take him into the bathroom, and sometimes he'll choose to crawl in the tub, and sometimes he'll be like, no. You can see that he's deciding if he wants to go in or not. And some days he will, and he'll swim. And when I do that, I always put stuff in there. It's not just an empty tub. I put rocks or things in there he can feel under the water. Okay, and rocks are good for lots of things. If you have overhead heat, warm these rocks up. It's thermoregulatory enrichment. It's texture, so it's sensory enrichment. And it's a natural object that many snakes are going to encounter in the wild. But I'll put these in the bathtub so he has something to grip onto. But some days he'll look at it and he'll just turn away and go sit somewhere else, and some days he'll go in. So enrichment should be the snake's choice, and if you're putting an enrichment item in their habitat, you want to put it away from resources. So you don't want to put it between their hide and their water, or between their favorite rock ledge and where they climb up to get to it. You want to put it off in a corner of the enclosure that isn't going to interfere with them accessing resources if they happen to be afraid of the enrichment item. Okay? And if they are afraid of the enrichment item, then you just need to take it out. Watch them for a little while, and if they're just too freaked out about it, remove it. It's that simple. Try something else. When you try stuff, though, you don't want to force it on them. You don't want to make them engage with it. You know, you can't drink if you don't engage with this rock first. Well, you don't want to do that. That's horrible. So you just want to make sure it doesn't interfere with stuff. I use a combination of plastic stuff, manufactured stuff, and naturalistic stuff. Real plants. Some of my snakes do really well with real plants. Other snakes or reptiles are going to destroy it, crush it, kill it. You're going to have to just try it, you know, see what works. Nadia's snake's been staying with me all summer. He flew out here from Iowa for my vet to do surgery. She's picking him up this weekend. He's been out here the whole summer. I put a pothos in his hospital tank, and it's flourishing, and he climbs in it. He sits in it. He uses it. But he also uses his sky hide. So he's got a sky hide in his hospital tank, and he sits in there all day and sleeps. But at night when he comes out, like last night, I found him climbing in the plant. Okay. I was going to say something else to that, because he also has a lot of paper towel rolls in there, and he likes to get in those. He's a baby Brettles python, so he's not that big yet. And he also has, so this is where you want to get creative with the enrichment. What's laying around your house that you're not using that you could just see if your reptile interacts with? We have horses at our animal sanctuary, but also I used to be a riding instructor. I taught riding lessons for years. I have a lot of old horse tack, stirrups from saddles. I've hung those stirrups in some of my reptile enclosures, including Tobias's. One of his favorite ledge is not the ledge I installed in there, but is that stirrup. He likes to lay on that hanging stirrup. I have an inland carpet python that likes to lay on his too. So if it's safe, if it's non-toxic, if it's not going to injure the animal in some way, just try it and see if they use it. I've also taken old reins from horse bridles, and I've hung them across the enclosures, and the snakes will climb on those. So you guys can use ropes in the same manner. These, I'm pretty sure this is a dog tub toy, but they sell things like this for birds that are made of rope. And then I also recently learned that I guess they sell scarf hangers that are kind of like this that people hang scarves through. So some of my clients have bought these rope, it's like a thing full of rope circles that you can hang. And the snakes like to climb in them and hang on them and crawl through them. but I guess they're for storing scars. I wouldn't know that, but get creative. It doesn't have to be something specifically for a reptile as long as it is safe for that reptile. This is just a cutting board, but if your reptile is not encountering wood a lot, and this has been used, so it's got, you know, scratch marks on it from knives cutting on it, this is a textural enrichment thing. So you can be creative. Just think to yourself, would this be safe for my reptile to interact with? You've got to ask that first. And then if the answer is yes, try it and see what happens. They may not like it, but you may be surprised. I've been surprised at some of the stuff that they end up using. I also use tubs a lot for enrichment because I'll cut holes in them. And some of my tubs have different holes in different places. So the snake can crawl in one way and out the other. And you can set these in different configurations. You can put substrate in it at the same time. You can hide prey in here for them to find. A hole saw is your friend. So I have holes in so many of things, and a hole saw is one of the best investments I ever made. It's just a saw set you get that fits on your regular drill. Okay? Alright, so I said there were 5 enrichment categories. Here's another example of how I use the hole saws. I use them a lot. And I make humid hides. So when I make a humidity box, I put the hole on top so that if the snake goes in and out, they're not dragging the substrate out the side. So I put damp sphagnum moss in here, and then I keep the hole on the top. But at any rate, we haven't talked about social enrichment. And you're probably all cringing. Social enrichment for my reptile, isn't that kind of taboo? Not really, because there are social species of reptiles. So there are snakes that are social. Garter snakes and rattlesnakes are the first 2 that come to mind, but there are other snake species that live communally. There are species of lizards and other reptiles that live communally or interact with each other. But you need to know, is my reptile species social, semi-social, solitary, or are they cannibalistic? Okay, so don't put your reptiles together if they're cannibalistic. But like my carpet pythons, my Morelia, they're not really communal, but they also are fine with, they don't care about each other. So mine interact and then kind of live and let live. If I have them out in a common area together, sometimes they'll lay together, sometimes they'll meet up and sniff and then go their separate ways. That's an example of one that is getting some enrichment because they're interacting with a conspecific in the way that they want to, in the way that they choose to. So you just need to know, is my reptile social or not? But I want to emphasize that social enrichment is not just, oh, you're my best friend, let's bask together. Social enrichment is any engagement with another organism. So even if it's a human, even if it's a dog, a cat, even if it's something they're not going to physically interact with, if they're seeing it, if they're smelling it, that is still can be a form of enrichment unless it's terrifying the animal. But my snakes are often very curious about smelling the horse smell on my clothes, or smelling the dogs, or smelling something that smells like a cat. I'm not putting them together, but they're getting to interact with that scent. Okay, zoos commonly put the sheds from other reptiles in other reptiles' enclosures so they can smell the scents from other reptiles, from other snakes. Zoos will even use prey, like agonistic species, as enrichment. So, like my Bridles pythons pretty much eat anything. They eat birds, they eat rodents, they eat whatever I've ever, reptilinks, if you've ever used reptilinks, that's a commercial reptile sausage. So I don't keep those smells away from them at other times. So if we have birds that come into the sanctuary, or we have mice that get in from outside, they're smelling those things. And it gives them they're like, oh, what, I smell that. And even though they're not getting to eat that thing, they're smelling it, and it's causing their brains to start working. It's firing neurons, and it's still enriching because it's different. Okay, so what zoos will sometimes do is take a prey species and walk it through like where predators are, or they'll take a predator species like a cheetah. Those are one of the common species used in leash train, and they'll walk it through an area where its natural predators are. They're not letting them interact, but it's the scent or sometimes the sight. And you might be thinking, doesn't it scare the prey animal? They're going to experience these things in the wild. The world is not stress-free. The world is not fear-free. We try to make it as low stress and fear-free as possible, but we still want to help our reptiles learn how to deal with adversity and build resilience. And these are things they'd interact with in nature. We're not going to let them get eaten, but it's okay if they smell something that could hurt them, because then their natural instincts are going to kick in and they're going to be like, oh, I need to get up here in this tree so it can't get me, or I need to burrow now so it can't get me. They're engaging in natural anti-predator behaviors. That is not a form of enrichment I would bombard them with daily, but every once in a while, it keeps their minds working and it keeps some of those natural instincts going, and it gives them an outlet for those natural instincts. Okay, so does that make sense to you guys? Mm-hmm. All right, so let me see how we're doing on time. All right, so repeat back to me the 5 enrichment categories. What was the first one? Cognitive. That is stuff we give our animals to do that makes their brains work and think. Goal-directed behaviors versus just instinct and habit. And snakes are really good at instinct and habit. My people with arboreal snakes, I bet they get into an ambush posture every night. And sometimes they don't pay any attention to movement around them. They're just in their ambush posture. How do I know when mine are really actually hungry? Is any slight movement around them when they're in that ambush posture, they're looking, they're moving, they're reacting to it. That's a goal-directed behavior versus this is just a habit of how I sit every night. Okay? Instinct is, oh, something moved, I'm going to move away from it. Or, oh, something moved and I smell prey, I'm going to strike at it. Without thinking. That's habit, that's instinct. Those are prepotent responses to stuff that's just automatic. Goal-directed behavior is, how do I get the food out of this ball? What behavior do you want me to do so that you will give me food reinforcement? How do I get this door open so I can get out of my enclosure? And I have a bull snake that knows how to slide her door open. Well, she didn't know how to do that when I first put her in there. But social learning does occur in reptiles. There are several papers specifically with lizards about how they have learned a behavior from watching other lizards do it. So social learning is a thing. So if the animal sees you do something enough, then they start messing with it and they start trying it. Bull snakes are pushers. So it was natural for her to eventually learn that behavior. Now I have to keep a lock on it because she knows how to push. I have a video of her pushing it open. Why would she do that? Well, it's reinforcing to her. So this is how behavior works. There's a stimulus. There's the door, I want outside, there's food. The animal behaves in some way. I push on this door, oh, the door opened. And then there's a consequence to that. And in her case, it's freedom. Ah, I'm out. And she likes to roam around. And we do live on a ranch, so mice get in, and the smells of those mice are in the house. So that is reinforcing for her. The freedom is reinforcing. So if a behavior is reinforced, meaning it has a positive outcome for the animal, it's something they like, it's something they find beneficial or pleasurable, they're going to repeat that behavior that got them that thing. If the consequence is bad, like if she had opened that door and something terrifying happened to her, she'd probably never open that door again. She'd be like, oh, that was horrible, I'm not doing that again. That's how animals learn, that's how we learn, that's how behavior works. We can modify animals' behavior by taking advantage of that. Okay, if we set up the environment to get the animal to do the behavior we would like them to do, and they do it, and we make sure it's reinforcing for them, they're going to do it again. That's how I do the target training, or the station training. So target training is they follow a training target from one location to another, or out of hiding, or out of their exercise area. They hold at the targets for me to examine them, give them an injection. That's a goal-directed behavior they've been taught to do in order to earn food reinforcement or something else. Okay. I also do station training where they learn the door's open, there's a station here. If you come out on it, you get the freedom to explore, you might find food. So good stuff happens if you come out on this station. Okay. And I use intermittent reinforcement, food reinforcement on that. They don't get fed every time because the freedom is reinforcing in itself, the textures they encounter, all of that other enrichment they're encountering. When I use the target, that's a continuous reinforcement schedule because you want them to know, hey, this target's like me actually giving you a command. Every time you see the target, you do the behavior, you get paid. That's different from, here's an activity station, the door's open. That's more of a self-reinforcing activity for them, okay? All right, so cognitive. What was the second one? Food. Dietary or food enrichment. That is making your meal an experience. Turn their meal into a goal-directed behavior. Not just, here's your free food that takes you 20 seconds to eat, and now what are you going to do with the other 23 some odd hours in your day? You want to extend the time it takes them to locate, find, manage, and eat the food, because that's what they would do in the wild. Okay, so we've got cognitive and dietary or food. What was the third one? Physical enrichment. That's where you have to know your species' natural history. What do they physically do in their natural habitat? What stuff would they physically be doing in the wild? And you can't just take a snapshot in time. This snake never does anything because at noon every day it's just sleeping in this rock. Well, what's it doing at midnight? Okay, what's it doing the other 23 hours of the day? It's not just sitting on that rock. So you need, if you get surveillance cameras, that's a great way to see what your animals actually do. Like, when is their most active time? That's where you want to give them the enrichment. Not when they're sleeping. Okay, I don't want enrichment when I'm sleeping. When I'm awake, I want stuff to do. So you need to know, when is my snake naturally awake and active? That's when you want to train them. That's when you want to give them enrichment experiences. Okay. So we've got, what was the first one? Cognitive,
dietary,
and physical, getting them to move, stimulating them to move. What was the fourth one? Sensory. Okay, that is sight, hearing, smell, what they feel on their body. And then some snake species can also have chemosensory reception, have infrared reception, and they can sense vibrations. Some lizards, I think, have a pineal gland on the top of the head, so they can sense things through that. So how does your animal perceive the world? Put yourself in your animal's place. It's called Umwelt. It's a German word that means it's how that animal perceives the world from their perspective. So I don't know if you'll fit in your snake's enclosure to lay in it, but I've stuck my head in there and been, this is what they see. This is how they're perceiving the world. Lay on the floor to see how they're perceiving the world. Lay on the floor and have someone come up over the top of you and have that perceived, because all vertebrates have Looming-sensitive cells in their brain. Okay? So there's been lots of neuroscientific research into brains and the different types of cells and what they do. Vertebrates, those are those of us with brains and spinal cords and neurochemicals that our body produces, like snakes, like us, like birds. There are cells in the brain that literally activate when there is a looming stimulus above them. And so they're naturally going to be leery and afraid of that. So maybe not approach your reptile like that until you desensitize them to that over time. They can learn not to be afraid of that, but initially that's going to be super frightening for them. You want to approach them from the side, from underneath, something that supports them. Lizards are the same. Looming is scary. Dark expanding objects coming at them quickly is scary, and that's because of those cells in the brain. And so what neuroscience has done is they can deactivate those cells, and then they've done this with fence lizards, western fence lizards. They deactivated those cells, and then the lizards aren't afraid of that stuff anymore. And then they've also activated the cells purposefully when there's been nothing scary around, and they behave as if there is something scary there. So we know that those cells do that. Okay? So we've got cognitive, dietary, physical, and sensory enrichment. What was the last one? Social. Why do you have to be careful about social enrichment?
They don't always go together, or they
Some
should be together.
animals really like that social interaction, whether with a conspecific or a non-conspecific. That means one of their own kind or a different kind of animal. And some are like, nope, I'm fine here all by myself. If it's not breeding season, I don't want to be around anybody else. And then there's going to be some that will eat each other. So you've got to know your reptile's natural reproductive biology and natural biology in general. Are they a communal species? Okay, garter snakes and rattlesnakes, they have hibernaculums, they live communally, they're very social, they do better under captive management if they're kept in social groups. Not every snake is like that. So you need to know that information. Okay? Alright, so what questions do you have for me about anything I brought or anything I said? Or do you have questions in general about anything else to do with reptile behavior? Because I have a lot of topics.
Where did you find this?
Amazon.com. You just put in plant mesh tent or butterfly tent, and they have all different sizes and styles. Some of them, oh yeah, this one does. This one has one side that's plastic. So when I turn it on its side, I use that as the bottom. And then you can put substrate in here, and it's easy to clean. Some of them don't have this, and they're just all mesh. They're meant for light to go through. So with these tents, I'll hang usually like UV and halogen bulbs above it so that it creates heat inside and light. The dog ones don't do that. These are going to block light because these on purpose are trying to give your dog or cat shade. All right, so it just depends on what you're going for. If you take your snakes or the reptiles outside, please make sure they don't get overheated. There's not things in the environment that are dangerous, toxic, or pathogenic that your snake could get, like parasites, funguses, viruses, bacteria. You just need to make sure about that. Sometimes I take my snakes outside. Some of them really like it. Some don't. You're gonna have to just see, okay? If you take them outside, they need to have a source for shade in the summer. You can't just, oh, reptiles love the sun. Let me set it out here on my deck with no shade. It'll die. Don't do that. When I take my retic outside, he likes it for like 5 minutes, and then he's looking for shade. Like he's really wimpy about that. He wants shade during the day. When most of my snakes seem to like outside better is at night. Some of them you can tell like the feel of the sunlight for just a few minutes, but usually then they're like, okay, I'm done. That's enough. So you just really want to be careful. That's not an activity I would do unsupervised. Like I leave them in these tents and stuff unsupervised. I mean, I'm home, but I walk away and they're in their tent and they're safe. I've never had one unzip it, but it's a possibility. If you're worried about that, you can clip the zippers together. But I would not leave one outside in the Colorado summer or Arizona or some of these places. Now, if you live in Florida and it's the natural climate, is the natural climate for your royal python or something? You know, I know keepers in Florida that just keep their reptiles outside all year long. But you've got to know, again, what's their natural climate, what's their natural biology, what's their natural history. Okay? Yes?
How do you manage frequency of enrichment, especially with animals that you're unfamiliar with?
So if it's a new animal, one that you're just introducing enrichment to, and it depends on what kind of enrichment, you're going to have to just choose the first time to introduce it, and you're going to have to see what happens. Now, if they really engage with whatever it was, how frequently do you do that? Not frequently, because enrichment is infrequent. Once it becomes routine, it's not enrichment anymore. Now, your reptile, all of us like predictability. So when you look at behavior science, it's a balance between predictability and enriching experiences. Because our lives are maintained at a tolerable stress level by making things predictable. I know when I'm going to eat. I know where my bed is. I know where I can find water. If you came home every day and your bedroom was in a different place in your house, you would be so stressed out. Like, I don't know where I'm sleeping today. Why can't I just go to the same place every time? So we need predictability, all of us, including our snakes and other reptiles, to maintain that low stress contentment. But then every now and then you want to do something exciting. You want to go do something you normally don't get to do, or you want to get a new item. And it's going to be really fun until the newness wears off, and then you're like, I'm bored with that now. Okay? So that's the difference between predictability and an enriching experience or an enrichment item. If I constantly threw enrichment at you, it would be like, it's too much, it's too stressful, you're always changing things, there's always a new thing here, it's too much. So you want to balance the enrichment with the predictability. So depending on the species of reptile and where they are on the boldness, shyness spectrum, so I'm actually developing a bold, shy essay right now for snakes, how to do this temperament testing snakes. It's been done in hognose snakes and in a few species, but I'm working more with like the Morelia, like the carpet python complex. So, and I'm working with Canova to do this for royal pythons to help better place the ones that people want to buy as pets. So if you know that your reptile tends to lean on the shy side of the spectrum, you want to be more conservative with your enrichment. But if you have a really bold animal that's constantly getting into stuff and trying to get out and seeking new stuff, then you can be more prolific with your enrichment. Okay? And those are temperament traits that organisms are born with. Okay? So Jim might have been born with a he wasn't. Jim's my husband. Thanks for coming today. He might have been born super shy. He can learn through learning and experience to be less shy, but he's never going to be bold. Okay, or if he was born really, really bold, like overly bold, like I'm constantly getting into trouble, I'm so bold and I'm reckless, he can learn to tamp that down and be less bold, but he's never going to be like, oh, I'm shy today. No. So these temperament traits are how your animal was born, but their personality develops over time through training and experience and learning and how they interact with the world. Does that make sense? Yeah. So this is where you need to observe your animal and get a baseline. And for reptiles, unfortunately, that usually doesn't happen overnight. Like, you got to watch them long term to really figure out what is the baseline for this animal. Like, I say through at least a year, because you're seeing them in every season of the year, day and night. And then they're going to change through their hatchlings, then juveniles, adolescence, adulthood, breeding age, and then when they get old, I have some elderly snakes that are in their 20s. You know, they're different than the snakes that are 6 months old. So temperament is set, it stays the same through time and context, but personality changes depending on where am I at in life, what am I experiencing, what have I learned. My personality is going to be different as a 25-year-old royal python than a 5-month-old royal python. So you really need to watch your animal's behavior, know their body language. I have some body language, a cheat sheet here if you guys don't have it, but this is on my website too. This is not all inclusive, but this is general snake body language. Like, just if you were really new or you just want a general guide, it tells you when they're comfortable and relaxed, when they're kind of like assessing the situation, I'm a little bit stressed, I'm not sure if this is safe or not, and when they're really over threshold in the red zone, I'm terrified. That state of mind is not where you want your animal, because they can't learn, they can't grow, they can't think if they're in the red zone. You want to keep them down here. Okay, so you guys are welcome to look at some of this stuff, take one of these, and then I'm available for questions.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And we ended on time with 5 minutes to spare.
Awesome. Can I take a picture of your...
Yeah, of course.
I'm totally stealing your bearded dragon idea.
Really?
Oh my gosh. Oh yeah.
I stole it from you too, to be fair. Like,
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.